Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today's December 2023. We want to thank Rob Grant, his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Also want to thank Simon Prentice for introducing me to today's guest, Arjun von Caemmerer. Now, Arjun, you pronounce it like more in the Indian way, just so people can hear it another way.
Well, the way I was given was Arjun. But when we came to Australia, well, actually, that's the Indian way. My own family way was Arjun. And when we came to Australia, I was a schoolboy and I got the nickname Urgent, which I didn't like. So I changed it to Arjun.
Very good. First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Genuine friendship.
Oh, that is good. I like that. I don't think I've ever had that answer in 40 years. That is really nice. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
The one that engages me most intensely would be sound.
Yeah. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
I guess it gives them a sense of cohesion.
What's another word for cohesion? What do you mean by that? Suss that word out.
Well, I think it gives them a sense of meaning. So, I mean, look, the problem is we're awash with information. And so we are selective in the information that we actually hold on to. And I think we make a decision we filter the information that's all around us, and we have to be selective. I guess we hang on to what gives us meaning, and we have to jettison all the rubbish that's mixed up with it.
Yeah.
So what's left over gives us a sense of coherence.
Yeah, I like your verbs. You're a wordsmith. Filter. Okay, so do thoughts create emotions?
And vice versa.
Yeah.
And vice versa. If you've ever seen, I mean, if someone is anxious, their emotions create thoughts. If someone is fearful, their emotion creates thoughts, as so I think it goes both ways.
Yeah. Is thinking more innate or more invented?
Thinking is derivative. Thinking is an internal language which comes after the experience, and it's a translation.
So humans invented it, or is it in us innately?
Oh, well, I think it's part of our faculties, but I think the languages which we think in, once we start to translate the experience into concepts or words or symbols, those are learned, culturally learned.
Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
experience it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's all very well having a theoretical knowledge of something, but I think the true test is sticking your foot in the water.
McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. And Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. So I like what you said. Can humans think without language?
Well, thinking is a language, in my view. So, I mean, I guess the answer to that would be no. It's not something apart from language. It is a language. Thinking in my view, thinking is a translation already.
Yeah. Someone told me the word translate is etymologic. I can't even say the word now. It's rooted etymologically in the word trader.
I never knew
Isn't that weird? Yeah, I don't know if it's true, but it sounded cute when I heard it. It's like, oh, because my friend hates when poems are translated.
Well, I have a very different view, because I think a translation is a work of art. And
Yeah.
I think the problem is people they have this idea of somehow you have to preserve the first created. I had this conversation very recently. We were talking about a Thomas Tranströmer poem, and there were two available translations. One, to me, worked very, very well, and the other one did not work at all. And both were translations from a language with which I'm unfamiliar. So yeah, it's an interesting. I think it's very interesting. I think translation is underrated as its own work of art.
Yeah. The good example is the German version of 200 Motels by Frank Zappa. Jimmy Carl Black goes, "You can stick this pin upside your ass." And the subtitle read, "Here's your pin back." Chomsky
Browning.
says, yeah. Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down? What do you do?
Well, I mean, I can only answer practically. I have this situation sometimes in a medical consultation where someone might come in who does not speak English, or whose English is rudimentary. And how do I communicate in that instance? I mean, the first is I try, where possible, to get someone competent who I can trust to translate.
Yeah.
But failing the availability of such an individual, we're reduced to other forms of language like body language and approximations and gestures, and hope that, I mean, it's not adequate for that situation, but it can be enough to at least express goodwill and an intention to further the conversation at some other point in time. Yeah. But also, I think silence is a language as well. And so the assumption behind the question might be that you've always got to fill the void with something, with words, but communication can occur without words.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my favorite answers is, "What do you do when language breaks down?" And the guy goes, "Group hug."
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how that works nowadays, is it? Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
We like to think we're thinking beings, but actually I think most human behavior is dictated by emotion. It's not dictated by rationality. The world would not be in the mess it is now if we were rational, but we're not. I'm not. I think a lot of people harbor the delusion that rationality is at the apex, but I don't believe that for an instant. Or at least it doesn't correlate with my observation.
Yeah, amazing, because 80 to 90% say, when are we more thinking or feeling? They go, "I think we're more feeling." They
Yeah, right.
literally say it that way, and they usually lean towards feeling. So my friend always counters it. He goes, "I feel we're more thinking beings." But we invented these words. So when we think words always work, so we think we can separate it, but you can't separate feeling
You
from
can't. And
thinking.
really, yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, yeah, you can't separate them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Bridget Bardot nailed it. She says, "When I make love, I don't think." And I'm like, good luck. How do you turn your brain off? Or like people who meditate, they go, "Okay, now think about not thinking."
Yeah. Yeah.
Two
Yeah.
questions from, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say they're trapped by their own language in a way.
Yeah. Trapped by their own language. So these are two questions from Alan Turing in the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
Look, I don't know what the soul is, so I can't really answer that question. I think my belief is that thinking is derivative, and we have a capacity to form languages, and thinking is one of those languages. Is it a function of the soul? If you say, well, the soul is the animating principle, then I guess, of course, then yes, on one level it has to be, since everything springs from that. But I may be completely misunderstanding your question.
Well, no, you got it. I'm after your hunch, your guess. But I love when people go, I can't answer that or I don't know. That's fine. But I'm not encouraging I don't know. But I just
Mm,
want people to go for their hunch or their
mm,
guess. Because some
mm,
people go, oh, that's a neuroscientist question. I goes, well, you can still guess if you want,
mm.
but you don't have to. There's no pressure. But the second, and then you use this word derivative a couple times now. Suss that word out. What do you mean more by that?
Well, I've had this experience sometimes where uh, I've written about music, and and it's a real problem to do so, because music is apprehended directly, orally, and in the body. And then to write about it, you've got to translate that experience into another art form, another language. So it's derived from that experience. And often um, it's seen as the handmaiden. The language is seen as the handmaiden to explain something, but I actually don't know that it can be explained. And so I'm not sure that when I say it's derivative, I don't mean it entirely in a pejorative sense, but there is the sense of which the explanatory mode, say with a piece of music, comes after the event. And in that sense, it's derivative.
Yeah. Really good, man. You're smart. I'm learning a lot. I appreciate your time here. And it evoked two things. One is uh, when Beckett talked about the wake, Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, he said, it's not a dream or it's not about something, it is something. So it's not a description of a dream. It is a dream if you read it out loud with a group of people. But you can't describe dreams. Same
No,
thing. People go, oh, I had this dream last night. You can attempt to describe it and get it across, or make,
yeah,
Jean Andalou by Louis Buñuel and Dali. That is a dream. But the
it's
other
like a
one,
mango. No, I mean,
it's
you
what?
taste it. It's like tasting a mango.
Yeah,
No amount of words is going to equal the contact of your tongue with that flesh.
yeah. That's also reminded me of what you said, bringing in music, was Tom Waits said the best music doesn't want to be recorded.
Uh-huh.
You
Well,
know, like music.
recording is a relatively recent historical artifact.
Yeah. But I
So
mean,
that,
we like that we have recording, because me and you have grown up in a world where we never had any. But music is a spiritual ritual. It's way better than having a recording. You're supposed to experience it live on the spot, but you know,
uh,
there's no
well,
supposed to.
I think I'm a very slow listener. And so I really appreciate the fact that recordings exist,
Yeah,
because most of the time I think it would go way over my head, or rather, I would have a superficial contact with what I'm hearing, and I relish the opportunity, if the music, to be able to rehear it.
yeah. But you never lived in a world where there was no recording, and that's why,
Correct.
because maybe if you lived pre-recording, your ear and sensibility would have absorbed the music differently, and then, blah blah blah.
No,
So
no, no.
here's the second Turing question: can machines think?
In a limited way, I believe they can. Well, put it like this: they can replicate some of the processes of thought. So,
Yeah,
but they can only work within the parameters that are fed into them. I play, for example, chess with a friend over the internet. Now, the computer's never going to turn the board over in a fit of pique. It's just going to play by the rules that are fed into it. The other thing
Right.
that's with this game that I play with my friend is that because we play over the internet and we send each other, the numerical alphabetic way of writing the moves. So each square has a letter and a number. But the problem is once you've played a few games and you turn the board every time, what starts off, if you're playing white, A1 is in your left-hand corner. And when you turn the board around, you can be completely disoriented because that becomes, a different letter altogether and a different number. And we've played this a few times where halfway through the game, there's a sudden realization that actually what was, thought to be A1 is actually H8. And we've continued playing along for a few moves. Now, and that's great because it means suddenly you have an unpredictable outcome. A computer would not make that error. So I think machines can think in a limited way, but I've yet to. I don't believe. I'm not sure about original thought. In terms of and lateral connections. I was walking to the yoga school the other day and I passed a number plate and it started with the letters RZ. My immediate response was, weasels rip my flesh. Right? Now, is the computer going to make such a connection? Maybe not.
Yeah. It reminded me, I used to say this line and you pulled it out of my subconscious. I think trying to explain singularity or AI years ago is like, if you're playing chess with a computer and you get so nervous, your knees start shaking and you bump the table and the chess game falls off.
Yeah.
We'll get to the point where the computer goes, chill out, Jerry. Here, let me pick the pieces up and put it back and let's keep playing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that will happen, but the other guy, the guy on radio said the other day, I thought amazing thing, because most people my age, and I don't know, a lot of people tend to go, oh no, we're ruined. AI is going to take our jobs and blah, blah, blah. And goes, get over it. It's no different than a pen or a cell phone or a bulldozer. It just it shapes your behavior. Get over it. And he said, AI is in its infant stage. So try to raise it like you're raising a good kid.
And it raises a question of what is a machine? Like, a shoe is a machine, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So it's a question of degree. Yeah. Anyway,
you're either your book or one of your reviews of your book said, William Carlos Williams said a poem is a machine. Is that what he said?
He might have done. I've read William Carlos. One thing, Jerry, you have to know is I have an extremely patchy memory.
Oh, don't worry about it.
Surprised me, and some things I just, I know I've read them somewhere, but it
was patchy. Funny when I read it in one of the reviews of your book. I thought they were quoting you, or it was the reviewer. I says, hey, I use that line in my movie. We got something in common. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
I try not to pursue anything, but if I was to weight the two, I would say, well, happiness, maybe not. Contentment, yes, but contentment's a tricky thing because it's only one step away from stagnation. Which you've got to be very careful. And meaning, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think, well, it's the real, it's the warp and the weft, isn't it?
What's that? What's that word?
The warp and the weft. It's what, it's our fabric. Without meaning, we'd be really floundering around. I don't necessarily pursue meaning, but I like it when I encounter it.
Yeah. Well, it's good. One is, how do you spell those two words? Warp and weft? How do you spell
warp, W-A-R-P, and weft.
Warp, W-A-R-P.
It's my non-Venice pronunciation. Yeah.
And the second word is weight, W-E-I-G-H-T?
Weft. WEFT.
The warp and the weft. Oh, I like that. Do you know the origin of that?
No, I don't. But it's a weaving thing, like
It's a
uh,
weaving thing. Yeah,
yeah.
nice. Okay, so yeah, that's what I'm after. It's me and you versus the wording on the questions. So, like, I've had people challenge that word pursue recently. And
Uh-huh.
one guy goes, well, I don't pursue happiness or meaning, I aspire to it. What's the difference for you to pursue or aspire? Are they the same thing or different?
Um, Pursue sounds a little bit more desperate.
Yeah,
Aspire sounds a little bit more ideological.
yeah,
Yeah, I think, well, I would question both of those, to be honest with you.
yeah.
Uh,
Well,
in a way, I feel that contentment or happiness is a gift rather than an acquisition.
yeah,
Of course, you can adjust the circumstances to make it more likely, but at the end of the day, I don't think you can you almost end up in a contradiction. It's like if I'm teaching yoga and people try to relax, it
yeah,
actually makes it more difficult. You have to, in a way, let go of that pursuing or aspiring, and then you may or may not be lucky for it to hit you.
yeah. Very good. I got the question from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says, meaning tends to last and happiness doesn't necessarily last.
But meaning also changes too.
Yeah,
So, I mean, both are ephemeral.
yeah. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
I think they arise together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're not really separable like that.
What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of thought, I would say, and the reason I'd say that is from experience. And this is not my experience, but the experience of my partner Naomi, where she has had the experience of simultaneously having the same thought as someone on the opposite side of the world. And they've only discovered it because they've perhaps emailed each other at exactly the same time. So there's almost an instantaneous, there's a mode of connecting which is not related to distance. And because speed is distance over time, I think thought is um, outside that construct.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong answers, but that one you got right. But it's funny. So would you call what she has ESP?
Um, yes, but again, that tends to raise up all sorts of questions of, authenticity. But I think of ESP a little bit like color blindness. So, but in reverse. So, I'll encounter patients who are colorblind and they can't see. The fact is, they lack the neural receptors to be able to see certain patterns. And if you go the other way around, well, perhaps other people have a greater number of neural receptors or whatever they might be than is generally the case. And so their capacity to detect is seemingly outside extrasensory. It's not really. It's just that they have an enhanced range for whatever reason.
They're in touch. Yeah, I get it. That's good. McLuhan, I think, nailed it. He called it complex clairvoyance. And
Uh-huh.
Zappa called it conceptual continuity. There's
Yeah.
a thread running through everything. It's just if you want to connect it, great. If you don't, no worries.
Hmm.
There's a poet, Audre Lorde. She said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Her colleague, Yvonne Rainer, said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Well, first of all, I'm not quite sure I understand what she's saying, but if I make a guess at what she's saying, if you look at the constructs of, say, an artist, then the question is, can those be deconstructed? And I don't know that they can, because I think they arrive at their product, if you like, through a very complex process which includes intuition.
Yeah.
And so you might be able to analyze and pick up certain patterns and see that, yes, these are there. But I mean, unless they're what they're making is extremely predictable, almost mathematically derived, I don't know that you can actually break it down so easily to a set of techniques.
Yeah.
So in a way, like if I look at someone, let's say you listen to, I see, let's say someone who's a real, really in a space of inhabiting their craft and their art. Let's say you listen to Zappa soloing. Now, you can derive from that any number of systems of mathematics or techniques. You still won't get to it, because it's more than that. They're just part of the parcel. And their intuition is based on their whole life experience to that point.
Yeah.
The decisions they make, what to include or what to exclude, what to emphasize or what to not. I think, you're always going to be behind in that process.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like Dweezil playing his dad's solos. He came out of Eddie Van Halen, so then he switched and played Frank's solos almost note for note. Really good, yeah. But we were like, get over it, man. Play your own solos. But then when he starts tapping like Eddie and he starts sounding like Eddie, he's like, no, go back to playing like Frank, please. But he's just playing album notes, and I mean, not to deter, but he likes to play the album notes. I mean, it's the problem with all Zappa cover bands. It's like, what's the point when you take the solo? Don't.
Well, it's got to be the main ingredient, which is the intelligence behind the solo. The solo is the result of something else. It's a little bit like in yoga. I teach Iyengar yoga, and there's a million techniques, but that it's and sometimes people mistake the techniques for the actual craft, for the art. It's not. They're an expression of the intelligence behind what led to that in the first place. I like this quote of Gulevec, who says, "A whole system of mathematics dies in every wave."
Yeah,
and I think that's true with when you see it, an artist. You can derive any number of systems from it, but you still miss the wave.
What's the person's name who said that?
Gulevec. I think it's Guillevic, the French poet.
Okay, so he said the whole system of
a whole system of mathematics dies in every wave. Wave, as in an ocean wave. I might be misquoting it, but that's the essence of it.
Yeah, no, that's good. But when you said there's an intelligence behind the solo, I can't stop thinking about when I asked Don Preston all these same questions. He basically, said, you don't think when you play music. It's like, yeah, right. You've got to think. Thelonious Monk said music is mathematics. But when you get so good, it's like Gary Player, the golfer, said, the more you practice, the luckier you get. So if you practice a lot, then you might be able to break away from what you practice and create something new. When Frank's book came out, the Frank Zappa guitar solo book, it's like,
Mhm.
what's the point? Anybody who
Yeah,
can play these should be going and playing their own,
yeah.
dang solos. Don't, but it helped a lot
But
of kids.
yeah, and
Yeah.
also they'd be interesting in terms of, I think they would be interesting if you could read that language in terms of seeing the shape of a certain thought process.
Yeah.
But but have to be careful not to. Well, I don't think you'd be able to, but I think the temptation for some people would be then to try to generate from it a formula for reproduction. I don't think that would be either possible nor would it be desirable.
Yeah. Well, that's all we got is, cover bands. That's all there is now is cover bands. And then, these rock stars hire their sons to back them. And it's like, oh no, God, please give me a break. I don't want to hear, this fucking song 40 years later by the same artist, the same way. This is like Steely Dan used to open for Frank, and they go, we have to play the album notes. Why don't you? He goes, I don't want to. So were they consciously going, well, we're going to sell more records if we play the live concert like is on the record so they can sing along? And Frank says, no, I don't want to do that. So, that's the beauty of Frank. He changed it every night, except when George Duke's taking a solo in one song, he goes, oh, I got the blues tonight, just like I did last night. Because he knew that you make fun of it. You whether you're thinking or not, the intelligence behind the solo. So but what is the tool? See, here's the thing. You really get it. You're listening. You're a good listener. And the question really is, what tool do you gravitate towards? But then I set it up with, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Oh, unless you expose the tools. And I add the word new. So it can be interpreted. What tool do you gravitate towards? You could say what new tool you gravitate towards, or you can say what new tool do you gravitate towards in dismantling the master's house? And one more thing, it's like Zappa. Frank didn't say, he said, who are the brain police? He didn't say, the evil capitalist consumer culture is the brain police. No, your brain, your own thoughts inside your head are the brain police. He just asked the question. He didn't tell you.
Yeah, and the question is always more potent than the answer because
Oh, yeah.
it does not have an end.
Right. So what tool do you gravitate towards?
What tool do I gravitate toward? In what context?
Any context you want.
Well, immersion would be my tool.
Oh, that is great. Now, again, suss that word out. What do you mean by it? You mean getting like getting knee deep in the swamp muck, like getting into it?
Yeah. So let's say, for example, I'm encountering something that interests me.
Yeah.
I detect it interests me, but I'm not. I'm aware that, and as I said, I'm a slow listener. Let's take it to music. I'm aware that there's a lot that I'm not hearing.
Yeah.
My approach would be to immerse myself in it, to basically try to surrender myself to that enough times to be able to, I guess, experience it from the inside out. So it's this whole thing of, the movement from something outside to where it becomes internalized, objective to subjective. Yeah, and that's the process I would use would be immersion.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you.
The tool I would use. Yeah.
That's why you're into Frank. I mean, you can't get into Frank unless you immerse yourself. It's like when I
No,
asked,
yeah.
I asked Mark Mothersbaum from Devo, what do you think of Zappa? He says, all the guys in my band like him, but I think his lyrics are too 70s. I goes, dude, Frank is too everything. Get over it. Okay, so what new toy do you suggest?
What new toy? Gosh.
Or it doesn't even have to be new. I mean, you answered immersion was a great answer for tool. What's a toy you suggest?
In a way, I think the problem now is that we have too many toys.
Yeah,
So I think maybe it's the other way around. Maybe we need to see, the absence of toys,
yeah,
what's left over. I guess, one of the things I observe is if I'm going, I think in America you call it hiking, here we call it bushwalking. More and more I see people with watches that measure where they are and how fast they walk and how
yeah.
many calories they burn and all this kind of thing. And I think it removes them from the experience, a little bit like social media. I'm not saying there isn't a place for them. I'm not trying to say that. But I think the problem is that these new toys remove people from their experience. So maybe the new toy is, to go naked.
I like that. I like it a lot because it's like what kills me is everybody walks their dog and they're staring at their cell phone or they're pushing their baby carriage. That's gonna ruin everything because the dog is like, well, what you do that all day at home? Why can't we go out and experience bushwalking a little together? No. And the kid is like, well, what are you doing? The same thing you do at home all day, stare at your cell phone. Can we go outside and walk together? Nope. I have to have my cell phone. Blah, 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 blah. That was good.
Mhm.
I like that. Go naked. So, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Very little, to be honest with you. Most of my worrying is done through the day, and I would, I guess, sit with it when I am practicing yoga or
Yeah.
walking or running, because I find that holding those problems, questions, issues, whatever they might be, in the process of movement or when I can engage bodily is a way also of not necessarily resolving them. Things don't necessarily get resolved, but it's a way of coming to terms with them. And I generally sleep well. So, things don't keep me awake. The most likely thing that will wake me up, this is true, is my own laughter.
Hmm. You mean in a dream you're laughing?
And it wakes me up. It doesn't
Wow.
happen. It doesn't happen every night, but I think I love it when it happens.
Sheesh, that is cool. Have you seen the videotape of Frank cracking up? It's 1 minute. He's trying to sing the song uh Dawn Work for Yuda or something. And
No,
oh,
yeah.
you gotta see it. It's on YouTube. It just got on YouTube. It was a bonus for anybody who contributed for the movie. It's
Oh,
the
well,
it's
I haven't
it's
seen
the
it.
pity. It's the epitome of Frank in 1 minute. He
Right.
sings this. He sings oh schlossage, and then he starts cracking up. And the recording engineer's voice can be heard. Oh, I
Right.
didn't get that. He says, Frank goes, what? You Hollywood engineers? I laugh once a year and you didn't get it?
Yeah.
You know. And then he goes, well, I guess God didn't want it to be recorded. So there's so much packed in the three little things Frank says in 1 minute. It's just like, it's the epitome of Frank.
I'll look it up.
Yeah. McLuhan learned from a poet, Ezra Pound, that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Why do we ignore them? Or
Yeah,
why? Well, I mean, maybe we don't have the tools to be able to read them,
yeah.
so it's not so much necessary. I mean, I do think people can willfully ignore what is going on around them. I do think that they can distract themselves or they can obscure it in some form. But I also do think that, an artist might have a particular intention, and their medium, their art, is their best attempt to express their intention. But the problem is, it's a little bit like, I guess, if you go with your analogy of the antennae, I think some people are able to receive certain frequencies. Some might be tuned to a completely different station, and it will bypass them. It's not that they're ignoring it. It's they actually literally think they don't hear it.
Well, do you think that's a good answer. I've never had that, but they don't have the tools to read it. So, you
Yeah.
wrote for Rondo Hatnick's,
Yeah.
Zap analysis. And yeah, now you have Tyler Bartram, putting out these tutorials on YouTube to understand Zappa. That's amazing. So you think, oh, well, maybe people will get Zappa a little better. I mean, I'll tell you a great example. Matt Johnson in Little Rock, Arkansas. Simon knows him. Great Zappa person, friend, music person. His local newspaper in Little Rock panned a Zappa album. So he called up the paper and said, I'd like to talk to the writer, the critic, because he missed Frank. He didn't get it. And so
Yeah.
the guy, he talked to him on the phone, or he had coffee with him or something, and he goes, "You're right. I get it now." So you mean,
Yeah.
but now that's all we have. I don't even watch movies or listen to music. I just watch the tutorials on them, you know. Or you read the comments. Why listen to the song when you can read 20 comments of humans reacting to it? So it flushes it out as a human experience more full. So yeah, I know the word ignore sounds elitist too. Like artists are doing stuff so deep that only a few will get it.
But the other side of it too is that I also don't think that you know I think once it's out there, once something has been released, the artist does not control the way it's received. And
Oh,
the way it's received though can be more than the way it was actually, something more than the original intention, or something different to the original intention. And that doesn't make it wrong. I just think it's going to be interpreted by an individual who's got their own way of reading
yeah.
and their own way of associating and their own way of extrapolating, and that is not controllable at all. So, I mean, of course, you could say, oh, they're over reading this, or they're reading things into this that shouldn't have been there. But I don't know whether that's a valid critique.
Totally agree. When the artist creates something, it's no longer theirs. It's the user.
Absolutely. It's
It's
ours. Yeah.
when McLuhan mid-career from the 40s to the 80s. In the 60s, his most famous aphorism was the medium is the message, or the medium is the massage. He said, nope, it's no longer that. It's the user is the content. He updated it to the user as a content, just what you explained. But it's like I was at a Zappa concert once, and a kid said, "Oh, when he says take a lump of grass, you know," I don't know, is it on Joe's Garage, Take a Lump of Grass? He says he's talking about marijuana. And I was like,
Oh,
dude,
yeah.
he wasn't. But that I had no control. If the kid wants to use it that way, and Frank could say, "Oh no, you misinterpreted it," that's fine. It's still, okay. So do artists have moral obligation?
Sure. I mean, artists are humans, and humans have moral obligations. In fact, I think the problem can be is if they identify themselves first and foremost as an artist rather than see themselves as a human, as part of a community. Because then their investment in their label, self-label as artist, sometimes will get in the way of their humanity.
Hello. That's like Jello Biafra and the Dead Kennedys wrote a song called "Kill the Poor." The dude in Vegas the other day took it literally. I don't know if he ever heard the song, and it's not Jello's fault, but it's like, dudes, don't fucking kill the poor, please. That's wrong.
Yeah.
Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I'm not afraid of ideas.
Yeah.
I mean, my only fear is that I won't understand them, but that's all right.
Yeah.
I can live with that.
Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
My early memories, the answer to that would be no. Like I'll tell you this, I had quite a traumatic childhood, and I remember it must have been in around 1972, so I would have only been about 8. I remember making this conscious decision. I'll only remember my life after 1970. Now, having said that, I do have some very early memories, and they are, I would think they're mainly oral combined. Well, they're mainly oral. So I do remember my mother singing. She would sing songs in German. She'd sing sea shanties, and they would be songs of comfort. And I remember that as a very early memory. I don't know how old I was, though.
Do you know the Ash Grove was a club in LA where all the LA rock stars went and heard the old blues and folk people?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the only group that Frank would go see at the Ash Grove was Ewan McCall singing sea shanties?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because he did it.
When you think that Zappa, for his funeral, had that the green fields of America.
What?
Paddy Maloney. I think I remember.
What do you
reading,
mean for his, what? What do you mean for his funeral?
I remember him saying that. I remember reading somewhere or something that he'd written that, or maybe it's something that Gail wrote, that what the song that he wanted played at his funeral was the green fields of America. And by that, maybe it was Kenneth Conniff, from the Chieftains, the vocalist. It's an unaccompanied vocal, and it's worth listening to. Will
you find that source of Gail saying that? Let me know. I'm very curious. I never heard that. I'm totally amazed. But
have you heard the song? Have you heard the song? Have you heard that?
No, I study Irish culture a little, and one of Frank's favorite bands was the Pogues, and Shane just died the other day. Shane McGowan. Yeah. So, anyways, no.
Yeah, I was going to say yes. He did an album with the Chieftains actually, which I've got. Yeah,
yeah, and it's funny because the only song that both the Grateful Dead and Frank did was "Handsome Cabin Boy," a sea shanty.
Yeah,
they both did a cover of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Look, it's both. I mean, memory is essential. So without memory, I mean, have you ever encountered someone with Korsakoff syndrome?
What is it?
it's basically complete disruption of short-term memory caused by excess alcohol. And so the individual who's affected has to construct their reality second by second. And the process is called confabulation. And when I was a medical student, I spent some time doing, as part of the rotation of study, psychiatry. And I met a patient who had Korsakoff syndrome. And it's like seeing someone drowning, and all they can cling on to are their own verbal constructs, which disappear as soon as they're articulated. And so there's this constant invention and projection, which is their anchor to the present. That's the absence of memory. So I think people, when they romanticize living in the present as though it's a state devoid of thought and memory, I think it is a romanticization, because if you see someone who's really lost their memory, he was in a state of panic, and the only thing he could do was invent a reality with words, which was not robust enough to keep him afloat. On the other hand, of course, memory can be a curse. If you have had, as people have had, traumatic events occur in their past, that can leave, I guess, a focal point which, anchors them to that difficulty. So I think memory is essential, but I also think it's also a curse. It's both.
Yeah.
There's a good use of memory and a poor use of memory.
Yeah. We call it services and disservices, rather than using value judgments like good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
But it's amazing what you said, because no one's ever taught me that about be here now. I live in that sort of world, aspiring to be like Eastern philosophy, Alan Watts and Ram Dass, be here now. And I repeat, the mantra I repeat is Wyndham Lewis, who said, artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. And people go, what? Go ahead.
Mr. Iyengar, the yoga teacher, had a great expression. So he would say, he made a distinction between being what he called thoughtlessly thoughtless and thoughtfully thoughtless. And so one is an
thought. The root word is thoughtless.
Thoughtlessly, so thoughtlessly thoughtless and thoughtfully thoughtless.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, the difference is a question of engagement. So, and it's a question of being present. So thoughtlessly thoughtless is an absence. It's where people are absent. They might be not thinking, but they're not aware they're not thinking. Thoughtfully thoughtless is an awareness of being thoughtless. And it can only happen if someone is engaged. Now, what happens there is, I think, memory is held at bay, but it's not absent. So in other words, it's not that it's expunged. It's there as a latent potential which can be activated or not.
Are you saying we should be more one or number two, or you're saying we integrate both of them?
I think I'm not saying, well, the reality is our experience oscillates between those. I mean,
two.
Both of them are states we have. We all of us have periods of absence, and hopefully most people have the experience of a clear mind, not cluttered with thought, where they're completely present. But I don't know whether that is the case,
But that's Bertolt Brecht. Yeah, the Bertolt Brecht, the theater playwright said, I want art that activates you, not pacifies you. And it's like, well, wait, or not put you in a trance. But wait a
Yeah.
minute. If art puts you in a trance, you might end up getting activated. But he was just saying, I don't want, airhead art, But
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes airhead art can help you.
Yeah. Yeah. But I understand where he's coming from as well.
Yeah.
So, when I teach yoga, I find this is an interesting thing to observe in students. If you have a beginner student, someone who's, say, never done anything before, and you try to teach them to, let's say, relax and be quiet, it doesn't work usually. And it's only through a process of engagement, which can be quite active, even initially verbally, that it's more effective that way. Otherwise, what tends to happen is, they might look like they're lying there quietly, but actually they're usually drifting and absent, not quiet and present. So the activity is a necessary catalyst, I think, in that circumstance.
You want them not drifting. You want them present.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Have you ever taught Simon yoga, or does he do yoga?
I have no idea, but I do know that Simon was an Aikido practitioner.
Oh, that's
Um,
right.
and I suspect that, I might be doing Aikido a disservice because I really know very little about it, but I would be very surprised if there weren't some elements that overlapped.
Yeah, judo and jujitsu, the freakiest thing in why can't I say that word? Etymologically breaking down jujitsu. You know what it is? Art
No.
and science gently.
Right. Interesting.
So it's push and pull, it's absent and present gently. So that's jujitsu, that's judo, that's like integrating both of them. What's the difference between art and science?
Science has a technique. So science, I guess you go with the classical definition of the scientific method, which is you make a hypothesis and you test the hypothesis, and you either validate or invalidate the hypothesis. So science has technique, and technique is really important for art as well, but art moves beyond technique. So I think, it's like, what did Zappa say? Without knowing the norm, deviation from it is just noodling. Yeah, and I think that's true. So I think art has a foundation of science. There are people who don't necessarily have, their foundation might not be the one which is classically taught, but they still may be artists. But from my own experience in teaching, say, yoga, which I believe is an art as much as anything else, you need to have the foundation of technique to be able to move, to be able to go somewhere with it. Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite hour, 90 minutes every week, is my wife teaching a free yoga class where we 4 blocks from the beach, and we see the ocean, and it's a park, and it's outdoors, and we're seeing butterflies and winos and dogs running through, and it's an amazing, it's the most needed thing in my life to have yoga once a week. I should be doing it more often. You do yoga every day?
I would lie if I said I did, but I would say most days, yes. And look, it depends upon your definition. So I guess one of the problems for yoga is that it's become narrowed into, the definition has become narrowed into the confines of a yoga mat.
Oh,
but that's but that is not really. Yoga really, in its essence, means to fully engage with something.
Yeah.
So there is
It's
all
real
sorts of
good.
yoga, but the reality is also that we do have, as part of our makeup, and it's very fundamental, our body. And so I think, intense engagement is true. It's yogic,
Yeah,
but if you ignore the body, then I think you also will find that you pay the effects of having a compartmentalized approach. So
yeah,
I think the part of it has a foundational part has to include that.
yeah.
But I
Our
don't.
bike. Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Yeah,
Our bike riding every day, 3, 4 bike rides a day, not,
yeah, yeah.
utilitarian. It's going to the store, or
Mm.
going somewhere. We don't ride bikes like, bike riders, hardcore. That is yoga for us, my wife and I. It is our yoga. In Yoko Ono says breathing is yoga. But how many,
Yeah, well,
I got a guy who wrote it on my calendar for next year. He says, take 10 conscious breaths every day. That's hard. It's hard to get people to take one conscious breath. It's just on
well,
automatic.
yeah. The way is, I think, the breath, the breathing, it is really the central axis, isn't it? Because whether you're, it's the central axis. Everything else gets woven around that. So,
Yeah,
and in fact, in all the traditional kind of yoga things, whether it's chanting or prayer or the breathing practices, pranayama, or the postures, asana, or the breath is really at the center of them all. So in a way, it's the axis around which everything else is woven.
yeah. Yeah, when I do a lecture about film or art, that's the first thing I do. Okay, let's all take a conscious breath in together. And we do it. And then I go, well, this is going to be a media yoga session because I want them to be there consciously,
But
Good
like
luck.
yeah, I mean, if I take my mother for example, I truly believe that gardening is her form of yoga.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And so I don't get too hung up about the form it takes. I think people have to find something in
Yeah,
their life which will have that function for them.
yeah, beautiful. Tell me someone within your immediate family, then
Yeah.
outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an
Hmm.
impact on you, kind of like a role model. And what specifically was that impact?
Well, role models can be either you emulate or aspire to the behavior that they exhibit,
Yeah,
or you can define yourself in opposition to that.
yeah,
So in my own circumstance, and I won't go into uh, grisly or sordid detail, but in my childhood, me and my siblings were subjected to quite a lot of sadistic abuse. And I think part of the way I identify myself now is in opposition to that kind of way of approaching people. So that would be, um, uh, in a way, using the role model as something to differentiate yourself from. On a
no,
more
that's
positive, yeah, on a more positive side, I mean, within my family, my mother's second husband, who is also called Jerry, by the way, and lived in America, in New Mexico, was a very kind and compassionate and very funny individual. And although I have a very different life to his life, he was a historian. He was a who specialized in the Holocaust. Um, he was a civil libertarian, but he was above all kind and compassionate. Um,
wow.
I think that's someone who I would admire greatly. Um, my grandfather, I used to admire a lot. He was a very complex, accomplished man. But I think as you get older, you also realize that these people, you don't necessarily want to emulate them, because you'd then have to take on the whole package. And there were things there that were very unsavory. Outside the family, I mean, I think the most, I guess I'd have to say Zappa, not in the sense of emulating his lifestyle or anything like that, but I like his approach to art,
Yeah.
to music. I think that's great. I mean, what I used to really like was whenever I encountered a new album, I would never be able to predict the direction it would take me in.
Beautiful. Yeah, that was good, because see, there's a little complex in the wording on that question, because I say, who had an impact on you? Kind of like a role model. And this one woman, she didn't hear that kind of like a role model. She just said impact. And she says, outside my family was Hitler. And it was because when she was growing up, it was this looming force over her head, and it had a huge impact on her life. So that was good how you sort of sussed out a bigger picture there. So did your parents raise you a particular religion?
My family has complex relationship to religion. So my father was a Kenyan-born Indian, and his background was Hindu. My mother, her father was Jewish. Her mother was Protestant. And so when my father and mother married, although they were separated when I was quite young, we had an admixture of Christian and Hindu traditions within the family. So we celebrated Christmas, we celebrated some of the Indian things like Diwali and Rakhi and so forth. Then my father divorced and remarried, and he married a Muslim, one of his students. And so then we ended up celebrating things like Eid and jettisoning the Christian festivals. I have quite a few siblings. My older sister at one stage decided to become an Episcopalian. My older brother is a devotee of Zen. My younger brother became a Sai Baba devotee until he saw the error of his ways. My younger sister married a Muslim and converted to Islam. And I have two half siblings from the second marriage, both of whom I think I'd say are kind of new age spiritual, whatever that is. I'm not particularly religious. So I've been exposed to a lot of religion.
Do you pray?
I write my own prayers.
Nice.
But I don't pray for anything.
Yeah.
It's really more an expression of intention.
Yeah.
And a way of, I guess, framing the way I approach each day. So in a way, I consider that as part of my yoga practice. And you might not have read these books, the Harry Potter books. Have you read those?
I have not, but tell me go ahead. What's your point?
Well, one of them, anyway, there's a scene in the first one where a person is going to catch a train, and the platform can't be found because it's actually a platform between platforms. It's 8 3/4 or something. And the only way you can find it is by flinging yourself into a brick wall, and suddenly you pass through it. So in terms of prayer, my own approach has been and it's a idiosyncratic approach. In yoga, there's a facet of it which is called pranayama, which is to do with breathing. And there's another practice called japa, which is to do with articulating sound. And my own practice has been to kind of find a combination of those together. So the prayers, for want of a better word, are really a part of a breathing practice where the words which I've written are articulated silently, either with inhalation or exhalation or both. They can be articulated aloud, but this is anyway the thing I've kind of stumbled upon.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
God to say to me or me to say to God?
You can do it both ways, but the first one was my question, but I always welcome both.
Well, if he was to say to me, it'd probably be to prepare yourself for another round. And if I was to speak to God, I'd say, what are your plans for next week?
No, but another round. So is that implying you believe in reincarnation?
Not at all.
Well,
But I don't believe in God either. So if I was in a position
right,
where God
right. That's no. One guy said, "Oh, I read." God says to him, "Oh, I read here. We made a mistake. We're sending you back." But
yeah, right.
you know what? 80%, 90% of people go, "You did a good job." That's what they want God to say to them. But yeah, but it's interesting. Go another round. That's my Paul Krasner said, I only believe in reincarnation in one of my past lives.
Yeah, yeah.
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Well, I've encountered in my own life, I think people who I'd say have had a tendency toward that, toward evil, but at the same time, I don't know that I've met anyone who I'd call wholly evil. So, in other words, yeah. So anyway, I don't think it's an external agency which uses people. No, I think it's a makeup of some people's fabric. But I also think you need to be able to distinguish damage begets damage. And so I think there are a lot of damaged people who go around damaging other people. What's the line between that and evil? I think where someone relishes malice, then I think that would start to move into evil.
The real question, or the hidden question, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you react to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Do you mean acknowledge them to them as an enemy, or to yourself that they're an enemy?
Right. That again is you put it in the context you want. We don't know what Alan was implying. You know, I'm taking it out of context. So he could have.
Yeah. So I certainly would say, yes, to myself, I would acknowledge them as an enemy. Would I acknowledge the person and say to them, you are my enemy? I probably wouldn't. No, because I don't think that would be fruitful. How would I deal with them? Well, the way I have dealt with them has usually been to minimize contact. And furthermore, to warn, if circumstances allow, other people who I think might be vulnerable. Do that. So that's so that's how I would do that. I guess if I was in a situation where I was really cornered, I would respond. I would fight.
Is killing ever justified?
Is killing ever justified? Well, that's a very broad question. I mean, and it depends upon.
It's actually.
It depends upon
hold on. Before you go on, I didn't hear what you said, but I want to tell you, this is a new question, and I'm
Okay.
trying to like work it out. So you can help me with the wording. Should I say, is murder ever morally justified? You know, I can complicate it with more words. And someone said, just leave it, is killing justified, ever justified? But, you know, you tell me, how could I best say that? And then tell me, you know, in a term that's sort of more open and not so confined by the words.
Well, I mean, if you say, I guess my question would be, is intentionally helping or enacting the ending of another person's life ever justified? I would say, in my view, yes, it is. If it's their intention, for example, you know, we have this whole thing recently in Tasmania, which voluntary assisted dying, which you may, I don't know whether you have that in California.
I know about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I absolutely think that's not an unreasonable. I think it's a good thing to have available.
Yeah.
So there are circumstances where I think yes, absolutely. I
Yeah.
guess your question possibly more going to as a form of punishment or revenge.
Well, that's it's really helping me suss out the question, because I mean, the easiest way is to say, if you had a vote right now, yes or no for capital punishment, how would you vote?
Well, I would vote no to capital punishment.
Yeah. And so then if I say, if you were going to vote intentionally ending a life of another for whatever medical purpose, how would you say it? Then you'd say, yes, that we should be able to end it. So, but that's where it gets into that point where if someone's going to kill you, do you try to kill them before they kill you? That's sort of the core of the question I'm after. But it is, what you've taught me well is there's a lot bigger picture here. There's capital punishment, and there's what do you call that, ending a person's life?
Well, here it's called voluntary assisted dying, but I mean, I guess
voluntary. Yeah, voluntary assisted.
Yeah. But then again, to go back to your original question, you know, is killing ever justified? Well, I mean, we do it all the time. I mean, I eat vegetables.
Right. That's it. I kill vegetable. But it was like, to go back when my parents were getting older, they go, look at, if you put me on a machine, pull the plug, I goes, look at, I'm not going to pull the plug, but I have 3 siblings. If they want to pull the plug, I'm not going to hold it against them. They're going along with your wishes, but I'm not going to pull the plug. So that's, you know, and another guy I recently interviewed, he said, he's a peace activist. He says, if someone's going to kill me, I'm not going to kill them back. You wonder if people are like that. Like, I feel the same way. If someone's going to kill me, I'm like, okay, go ahead, kill me. And then you're like, what? I shouldn't have done that. And is your mouth and your mind kind to present yourself as a, you know, more like whatever. Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
I also think that, you know, I mean, it's in a way you can have a thought about these things, but in the actual circumstance, you may be reacting.
That's it.
Beyond thought. So maybe something instinctual kicks in. And certainly, if, let's say there was a relative of yours whose life was being threatened and you're standing close by, would you just stand there and say, no, I'm going to be a pacifist, I'm going to let this happen? Well, I wouldn't, I'd have to say.
Yeah, it does get complicated, and it helped me, because I'm not sure I really want to ask that question, because it almost is, it's a little creepy. I don't want to talk about killing. There's too much of it. Why even bring it up? But this is Nassim Taleb. Games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, We don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. My friend said, well, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bates, in The Anthropologist, says, if the criminal gets caught, does he go, oh, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, wow, I did something morally and socially wrong? So it's a lot of prompts, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
The question is, who does it work for? So
Yeah.
I mean, punishment can satisfy the desire for revenge on the part of those doing the punishing. Does punishment work as a form of rehabilitation, or rather, I mean, being punitive isn't necessarily going to. I mean, it might satisfy something on the person who's being punitive, but will it really help someone confront the effects of their actions? I don't believe so. So I mean, I think in a way, I think for someone to really recognize what they've done, to confront what they've done, is probably going to be more potentially effective, unless they're a psychopath, where they really don't have any empathy. I think punishment serves the punishers more than the punished.
I get that. People say that often. Yeah. Yeah, that's like, if Trump.
Time, you've got to also, if someone is extremely damaging, someone is extremely damaging, I definitely think there is a responsibility to try to limit the damage.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you have Mr. Trump wanting to get back in there. I think I wouldn't encourage.
You have major ESP, because I was just going to say, before you said that, I was going to say, if Trump goes to jail and he writes a book and he says, I'm sorry, I made mistakes, would you forgive him?
No, because I wouldn't believe him.
That's what most people say. But come on, man. What if he says, I'm being honest and truthful? And he's staying in jail and he's not coming out, but his book is, a bestseller, and he can't run for president.
Yeah. No, I think he's had a chance.
We're laughing. It's not funny.
No, it's not funny.
Do we know, did Frank ever meet Trump? He must have.
I don't know.
That would have been a. Okay,
Yeah.
So here's James Joyce, the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checks out. He says, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Faulkner says years later, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, most people do just live life. Proportionately, few people go and watch plays. So, but then again, I think the play is a construct. Art is a construct, and it's So I think there is a place for both. The other thing is too, there's this whole form in Japanese movies called slice of life. Now, it's a little bit like that thing, who wrote about that? Borges, the map. If you had a detailed enough map, it would be the size of the world.
Wait, I missed the word. Hold on. Knack, K-N-A-C-K, or Nat?
No, map, M-A-P.
Oh, map, the map. Okay.
Yeah.
And then what film did you quote?
No, it wasn't a film. It wasn't a film.
You're
It,
saying
it,
in Japanese cinema, they call it
oh, sorry, no,
slice
so
of.
I said a couple of things together. So the first was
Okay.
that there's this genre called slice of life,
Okay.
which,
Yeah.
which is realist. And, I do kind of think, well, for something like that, yeah, why not live your life?
Is that
Um,
Ozu? You mean like Ozu?
I don't really know. I just know that I've
Okay.
seen a few and I've been bored.
Okay, so slice of
Yeah,
life genre, Japanese movies. Then what was the next
yeah,
point? Then I
yeah.
I missed
The
the
next one
transition.
was to say that, like, um, Borges had this thing about the map and producing. If you had a cartographer who was going to produce a really detailed map of the world, it would be the size of the world.
Right. You mean Borges, the writer?
Yeah, I might be pronounced. Yeah, Borges. You
Yeah,
say
yeah,
Borges.
Borges, the writer. Okay,
Yeah,
so if
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
really,
yeah.
yeah, that's also Korzybski saying the map is not the territory.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
Maybe it's similar, but you're saying that's like Hollis Frampton says when you lecture on films, you should be in a dark room. Because that's how you watch films, but not really anymore. So if you were going to make a map, then it should be the size of the world. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, well, no, I'm just saying if you're going to put everything in it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the art is a condensation. It's a reduction. And I don't
Yeah.
mean that in a bad way, but it's a condensation. So in a way, the art is in the editing, and that's why we go to see them. And the other thing is, of course, when you know it's art, you're kind of insulated from the actuality. I mean, you know, yeah. So it's a kind of a harmless way, or relatively harmless way of experiencing at a distance, but it still is
Yeah.
at a distance.
Yeah. Um, I asked for 90 minutes and we're almost there. Can you
Hmm.
go more time
Yeah, I
now?
think so. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, yeah, no problem. No problem.
How
Yeah,
much how much more time can you go? 10, 20, or 30 minutes?
30 minutes, no problem.
Okay, good. Now, I would like to do a part 2 in May or June because we hardly got through a lot. And I mean,
Yeah,
we didn't get through all the questions and but I want to stay on this for a second because I came across these. It's stupid to try to define art, but one artist, I'm just curious you saying art is a construct. This is your thoughts on Mike Kelly, an artist. He said art is making your problems other people's problems.
well, it can also be making your solutions other people's solutions.
Yeah. Yeah.
But first and foremost, I think often it's really trying to um, condense a problem into a way that, if I speak for myself, in a way that I am satisfied I can actually start to grapple with it and understand it. Um, Now, whether that means other people get that or it becomes a problem for them, I mean, again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's outside your once it leaves you, it's outside your control altogether.
Yeah.
So it may be their problem, it may not be their problem. It may be their salvation, it may not be their salvation. But I think it's the the intent is really in the process of the making of it, or the making of it is very different to the way it's going to be received as a
Yeah.
problem, as a solution.
Yeah, Duchamp said there's no solutions because there's no problems. Now, is that too mamby-pamby for you? Do you get what he's saying? I mean, what do you think of that? Well, he didn't pull a plural. He said, "There's no solution because there's no problem."
Well, I mean, that's in a way because they mutually define one another. I can see that. Um,
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing, like um, I sometimes have this exchange with a fellow yoga teacher, and it's basically occasionally in the classes. The school is in the city, and sometimes there's very intrusive noise from the street. And so there are two approaches. One is to try to insulate yourself from the noise. You
Right.
concentrate more. And the other is to open yourself up to it so
Of
that it's no
course.
longer noise. It's no longer external. You actually incorporate it. And I guess that's what one, if you can incorporate it into the picture, then it's no
Yeah.
longer a problem. It's no longer
Yeah.
something separate. It's just part of the picture. I
Yeah.
like that approach, actually. Yeah.
That's total John Cage.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's what Cage was all about. He was just like, no, that's everything's music. I mean, whatever you want to call it, it's not, is noise good or bad? But yeah,
But it
yeah,
does
that's
depend then upon your intention and hearing, because I think,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I think, yes, if you it's a lot to do with intention. So, yeah, if you can allow yourself to open your intention to hear that as music, absolutely agree.
or just hear it as um bad Philip Glass, or hear it as Philip Glass music. So, or or industrial music. You're like, oh, that's industrial music.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's why I was
Yeah.
going to bring up the Shags earlier. Like, do you love or hate the Shags? Have you ever heard them?
No, I haven't. I haven't heard
Oh
them.
my God, they were one of Frank's favorite bands.
I'll look
So
them up.
yeah. I mean,
Good.
just look up. Who are parents? The Shags.
Right.
Uh,
Okay.
we'll we'll talk about them in part two. But a couple more things on art. Here's a poet. Her name is Fanny Howe. The point of art is to show people that life is worth living by showing that it isn't. What do you think of that one?
Well, it sounds very pessimistic first on first face on face value, and it makes me curious about her what her background was and what the context for such a
Yeah,
declaration is. Um,
yeah.
I
You're
don't agree
smart.
with the sentiment, but I mean, she may
Yeah,
have had a valid reason for stating it.
yeah. Yeah, then there's the classic McLuhan and Warhol both said art is anything you can get away with. When I told my friend when I told my friend that, he goes, "That sounds like Trump."
I mean, I think, the thing with uh, any art form is, I mean, Zappa has it in his book. He talks about the frame,
Yeah,
and I think um, there's a constraint, and it's within that constraint you have the composition or whatever you want to call it.
yeah,
There's a constraint.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
That's Dead Air, one of my favorite Zappa pieces. It operates because he's in front of a microphone and we're in the setting of a concert. And now we're
mm,
going to do a song that we haven't done in years called Dead Air. And one time, Frank was in the hallway of some hotel and these German executives saw Frank Zappa. Oh my God. And he sees his band members are standing next to his, do a piece for us. And Frank goes, okay. And they just mimed,
yeah,
no
yeah,
sound. because
Yeah.
Frank was a pantomime. Most people don't realize he was a pantomime. If you
Mhm.
can see, there's some footage of him doing this pantomime, like Marcel Marceau mime
Mm,
thing. In this
mm.
one tour, he did it. He built something, you know, and no sound. So here's the woman.
He also did a cover version of 433.
Oh yeah, I know that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is great.
Everyone had very long biographies in the CD booklet,
Yeah,
and his were 2 words, American
American
composer.
composer. I know.
Yeah,
I love that. Frank
yeah.
was proud to be American and proud to be a composer. He is first one of his first business cards said master blues guitarist and composer.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen a picture of it. Yeah.
Okay, here's someone that jammed with Frank and Simon works with her, Yoko Ono. The
Uh-huh.
job of an artist is not to destroy, but to change the value of things. And by doing that, artists can change the world into a utopia where there is total freedom for everybody.
Nice word.
Nice what?
Nice words.
Nice
I like
words. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But you mean she's being overly positive or you don't?
Yeah, I do mean
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't believe in utopias, although let me tell you something interesting. In Queensland, one of the states in Australia, there is a town called Utopia.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Frank has a great song, man, from Utopia, but he
Yeah,
didn't write it.
yeah. No, no, no.
Utah Phillips, folk singer, labor activist, said, anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
Well, every person is entitled to make the rules.
Yeah.
The problem is when they impose them on other people.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, back to etymology, the word freedom is basically what Utah said. Etymologically, freedom means giving oneself one's own rules.
Uh-huh.
So the question is, what does freedom mean to you now? But I'm going to set it up with 2 quotes. One is a poet, T.S. Eliot. Freedom is only truly freedom when it appears against the background of an artificial limitation, which caused McLuhan, who was highly influenced by T.S. Eliot, to ask the question, how are you to argue with people who insist on sticking their heads in the invisible teeth of technology, calling the whole thing freedom? Good question, huh? So,
Yeah.
what does freedom mean to you now?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I mean, I think part of the problem, and you see this in America, I think actually as well as in other places, is the um, the restriction of freedom to apply to the individual, whereas the reality is we are social animals. We live in a society. With that comes our responsibilities. I mean, I guess the example I'm thinking of in America is the gun culture that's
Yeah,
there, and where people say, "Well, it is my right.
yeah,
You know, it's my right to 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 bear arms or whatever it is." Um, and I think that the difficulty is the balance between um, an individual's liberty, but the reality is, people don't. They're not. See, some of these things almost have the implication that the individual lives in a vacuum by themselves, and I don't. That's not the case. That we all depend upon one another. So freedom is always going to be relative. It's not an absolute. And in a way, I think so in a way, I think freedom is a bit of an illusion, actually. Externally, it's a bit of an illusion. I'm not saying it's a bad to have those restraints, constraints, or confinements altogether. I mean, I don't believe in a free for all. When you look at the example with I remember when I was in America, I went for a drive with a woman, and in her glove box is a pistol, in her handbag is a pistol, and I understand, she thought, I have the right to have these weapons in my possession. I can't fathom that, really, as being an expression of freedom.
Yeah, that's create the disease and offer the cure.
Yeah.
That's horrible. Yeah, in my opinion.
But that's an example. I mean, I guess that's a concrete example of where that concept goes wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, we had one of the world's worst mass shootings in Tasmania. I don't know if you're aware of that.
yeah.
A few years after I got here, and the Conservative government here, and they were quite conservative, enacted this whole thing of basically disarming the population. They had this scheme. They bought back all the guns, or tried to, as many as they could, and with quite a lot of success, I have to say, in forestalling at least similar incidents.
And you're saying you were happy that they did that?
Absolutely, because I think, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like a no-brainer. You have less guns, you're going to have less killings.
And less stupid people holding guns who are easy to feel aggrieved or injured, and then they have this mechanism where they can amplify their hurt willy-nilly.
Yeah. Well, when you were talking there, you reminded me of this San Francisco writer, sort of in the hippie era. I don't know. You ever read Richard Brautigan?
Yeah. In Watermelon Sugar.
Yeah. Emmett Grogan. Emmett Grogan wrote a book called Ringovlia. You might check him out. He's sort of in that same genre, same time in San Francisco. And I like him because he says everything should be free. Right. I mean, come on. Like, I hate when people sell dirt or water. It's like, who gave you, come on, isn't dirt and water free? And then, my favorite bumper sticker, talk about LA. My favorite bumper sticker ever in LA was, the worst things in life are free. Which is an amazing thing, because everybody wants something free. So that goes along with what is freedom and what is being free. So here's a question that McLuhan asked. I'm always trying to figure out what it could mean or what it might mean, not necessarily what he meant. How about technologies as the collective unconscious, and art as the collective unconsciousness. So there's a differentiation between art and technology. And then there's a differentiation between conscious and consciousness, because he uses the consistencies, they're both collective. What do you think he's getting at, calling technologies as the collective unconscious and art as the collective unconsciousness?
I don't really know. I mean, the technologies are the means to, I guess, to realize the art, and the art then becomes the product of the technology.
Right.
And then I guess in a way, when he says collective unconsciousness, I guess they are, in a way, they become that whole repository of art which is out there, which is able to be interacted with on whatever level people are able to interact with it. So it's
Yeah.
not, it's not defined. I get, maybe that's what he means by unconsciousness. It's not defined. It finds people find their meaning through their encounter with it. But
That's
to
good.
be honest, I'm not really sure I understand.
That's interesting, because it's like technology is defined. Here's a paintbrush. Here's how it works. Here's a pen.
Mm,
And then here's what you drew with the pen, or like
mm.
your amazing concrete poetry. So let's go into poetry. We got about 15 minutes. Not
Yeah.
yoga yet, and not medicine. Or what are you? Are you a doctor?
Yeah. I'm a medical practitioner.
You studied straight medicine and alternative. Is that right?
No,
You
I never really studied well. First of all,
okay?
I don't believe in the word alternative, but yeah, no, I have a medical degree
You got
from
medical
the
degree. Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah,
you're a
yeah.
doctor, you're a
I'm a
yoga
family
teacher, and you're a
yeah,
poet. So let's
yeah.
let's tackle poetry first. Growing up, when was the tipping point you go, "Oh, I'm reading poetry. That's what I want to do." Where's that tipping point? Were you studying poetry in high school and college?
Well,
And you're like,
well, no,
where's that tipping point? Yeah.
oh, well, I remember the tipping point very clearly. So the tipping point was an incident which occurred. So I think I alluded earlier to the fact that we had a very uh, uh, fractured family environment. So what had happened was, just briefly, so you get the context, my father had 5 children, and he basically took 3 of them, the 3 youngest, which included me, off to Kenya, off to East Africa, and left behind my older brother and sister. And we lost touch with them for many, many years. Now, when I was then a medical student, I was in my 4th year of medicine. I had not been in contact with my older brother or sister for quite some time. And I received a call that my older brother had a suicide attempt. He jumped off a bridge and he'd broken both his heels, both his feet. And so I decided to write him a get well card. And that was my first concrete poem. And in my book, that is the poem Hex Agony. And what I just started writing this piece, and then I just realized these words can be arranged to read line by line. They can be arranged to read at the same time, simultaneously, down one side of a hexagon shape, down the other side, and through the middle. And so I literally stumbled upon this fractured way of writing, and that was the trigger for it. That was the first thing I ever wrote. And then I thought, this is a really interesting form I'll see where I can go with it. So I didn't really, I mean, my mother is a writer and she did her PhD on Dylan Thomas, but I was unaware of that at the time. So I'd never considered myself a writer, and I really started off playing with fracturing words, playing with fracturing sentences, phrases. That was my point of entry into writing.
But did you read poetry previous to that casually or not at all?
We did a bit in school, and there were things that I liked, like Lewis Carroll, and I encountered, in school, I loved T.S. Eliot, so that kind of thing. I had a couple of excellent English teachers at school, but I never really considered taking a pen to paper.
Right.
Never really. It wouldn't have entered. If you told me, oh, one day you're going to write some things down, I would have laughed. I would have thought it completely unlikely. Completely unlikely. So yes, it's something I stumbled into, really, literally.
What age were you when you stumbled into it about?
I think I was probably around the age of 19, 20. Yeah.
When you write a poem, what role does intention play in your creative process? And I'll set it up. A screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. So, what role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing one of your poems?
Okay, so it will depend a lot on what I'm trying to grapple with. I usually do have an intention when I'm writing a poem. So I'll often have a idea, and really my dilemma is not so much it's not so much what words I will use as what form I want the words to occur in. So in other words, my biggest dilemma usually, and I don't really care how long it takes, I'll wait for it to occur, is to work out what the structure is, which then becomes later populated by the words. That's not entirely always the case. I mean, sometimes actually the preoccupation will write itself in a way. So, but there are some forms, especially concrete poetry, where it's really the structure will almost dictate the way in which the content can be assembled. So, for example, in my book, there's one where I had the intention of trying to put in the whole formal 8-limb structure of yoga into one page, one piece, one circular piece that had a particular kind of configuration. And that took a long time to realize that, years to realize that. Other forms are, no, it may be that it's more, there is something I want to say, and then it's finding the most appropriate form in which to say it. So there's a variety. I probably haven't at all answered your question.
No, you answered it well. And it's interesting because two things. Did you eventually go, oh, I'm writing concrete poetry, or someone told you, and then you studied that genre? Have you studied or read other concrete poets?
I have. Well, so when I first stumbled upon it, I was completely unread in any other field. And it was literally a discovery. And it was really a discovery, my own discovery. And then I discovered, when I started to research, other people have discovered the same thing, which of course is always the way, in different forms. I wrote quite a lot before I even was aware of the existence of the term concrete poetry. I didn't even know it existed as a term. I found it later on. And it was a term that came in the 1950s, I think, actually. Hadn't been used before then as a formal thing. So really, in a way, I didn't really have a label for what I was writing initially, and then I found the label was already there. And then, of course, yes, I'm curious. I started to read and find other examples of concrete poetry.
The freakiest thing is I'm interviewing another great concrete poet this Tuesday. Her name's Joanne Drucker. Have you ever read her or checked her stuff
No,
out?
but
Check it out. Yeah. She's quite an accomplished concrete poet as well. It's really freaky that I would be two right in a row. How did that happen? That's just like simultaneity or coincidence. So Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much do you think of your reader when you're writing your poem?
I try not to too much initially. I do at the editing stage at the end. But I think if I get too focused on the reader, it can inhibit my own process. And I also feel that, because you don't control the reading, in a way, you can't be too concerned with, you can't be overly concerned. I think, the crafting of it at the editing or the crafting of it at the kind of final stages, yes, I will try to present it in a way that, will be able to be apprehended. But at the same time, I know that a lot of the things might not be comprehensible, and that's fine.
Yeah, part two.
But if I'm writing someone for an individual, if I'm writing a piece for a person or for a circumstance, it's got to be intelligible to them. It might only be to them. It might not be intelligible to anyone else. But it does, yes, in that case, of course, it's going to be something appropriate for that particular person.
Yeah.
Project.
One thing in part two, I love to get into being a doctor in yoga, but also Frank Zappa. And I wanted to get your opinion of this. Frank says, I write this music for myself. If other people like it, that's just a bonus, and it's like, to me, he was over romanticizing it, and not to criticize him, but he knew if he hit these notes or sang these lyrics, kids would buy his records, then he could make money and make more music. Do you think he was like that? He didn't think of his audience, or he did? Was he over romanticizing it when he said, I don't write for other people?
Well, I think he clearly did present his art to audiences, and he put a lot of effort into making it the best presentation possible in terms of sonic clarity, in terms of contrast, in terms of provocativeness, in terms of contemporary commentary. So I absolutely think that's a bogus statement.
we caught you.
Yeah, at the same time, I think his approach to it was uncompromising.
Yeah.
I do think that there's a level at which he thought, well, they either get it or they don't, and that's fine.
It's really good. I like that. We caught you, Frank. That's bogus, but you have a right, because the main thing I learned from Frank was to embrace contradiction.
Yeah.
And nothing. What's the greatest line Frank ever said? Nothing is what I want. Come on, that's pure Zen. I know he studied Zen too, but who I interviewed the other day was Artist the Spoon Man. He played.
I saw that, actually. I saw it. It was very, very, very touching.
That wasn't that touching, but for Frank to tell that guy, "You don't have a commercial, a
Mm.
bone in your body," to come from Frank, who doesn't have a fucking commercial bone in his body, that's pretty heavy, I thought.
Yeah,
That was really
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought touching. I thought it was great how the first 20 minutes his head was like this.
Yeah.
And I finally said, "Are you doing that for a reason?" He says, "Oh, I'm sorry." That was classic. What if I didn't say it and he did that for the whole 2 hours? I was like, wow.
I'd seen the name, but I'd never known. I still don't really know what he does, but I'd seen the name. He was credited on one of the albums. Um,
Is he? He's credited on a Zappa album,
yeah, yeah.
but
It's
not
a, it's a,
not you mean a post
yeah,
death album.
yeah. No, well, he's credited. I don't mean he's playing on the album. He's
Oh,
credited.
he's thanked on some album.
Yeah, and I
Oh.
think it's in Civilization Phase 3, actually. Yeah,
Oh, that could be it. You're right. I don't
yeah,
know that
yeah.
album hardly at all. And that's really good to know because then my YouTube algorithm shot up a thing of Terry Bozzio,
Right.
Motts and Morgan playing with Spoon Man.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I was like, wow. I mean, I think I met him years ago. I don't know. He said he played in Eugene. Anyways,
Mm.
that was that was touching. Okay, so let's end with this one. Uh, and I hope this never ends. This has been so delightful and
Thank
so
you.
so generous of you to share your knowledge with me. I learned a lot. McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. Like knife and fork extends our teeth, the shutter in a camera or projector extends our eyelid, and maybe even non-tangible like philosophy or religion might be an extension of consciousness. What does the writing utensil extend for you? Whether you're using a pen or a keyboard to write your poetry, what is that utensil extending? What humanness?
Well, I think the end product of using the cosmic utensil or whatever it is that you're doing is that it brings into existence something concrete, something tangible, something visible, something perceptible, which otherwise would not have been there. And then that itself becomes, in a way, it's like a stepping stone off that into another area. So I think
Yeah.
they are an extension. Yes, I agree with that. I mean, you read a word and or you read a phrase, and it's you where it takes you. It's not, it's a point of departure.
Yeah. It's like a magic carpet ride. It's
Mm.
when they ask McLuhan, what does movies extend, film extend? And most people say eye, memory. There's lots of good answers. He says, no, movies extend your foot because you're traveling.
Uh-huh.
So, it's funny, is it? It's a funny answer, but he's not saying he's right and they're wrong. It
Mm.
extends. You know what a poet in Italy told me? I says, what does the pen extend? He goes, my tears. And I love the answer because it is a humanness
Mm.
to
Mm.
to get, my mom taught me tears are crying is good because it gets emotional release out, but it also gets toxins out of your body. We don't realize there's like chemical or whatever it is. What do you call it? Chemicals or, it's like peeing or pooping. It's getting out
Mm.
this stuff out of your
Mm.
body.
Mm. Mm.
Well, I really don't want this to end, but that Arjun, this was so amazing. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Jerry.
And
And,
I'll,
I'm grateful. I'm very happy to have this opportunity. It's great. Not
yeah,
really
and
great. See you. And
And let's pick a May or June Sunday, and we can return and get deeper into the swamp muck of yoga, especially.
yeah.
And I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, but stick around for 1 second. After I do, I got a question for you.
Okay. Okay.
So thank you so much. And I look forward to part 2. Really amazing.